think it has to be the most audacious 22 exit that I think the sport might ever have seen.
They had balance, right, Charles?
They did.
It wasn't as predictable and easy to read.
I mean, that is probably the best feat from a prop you ever see. Obviously, Ben Curry has been phenomenal off the bench, and he was again yesterday.
Is he close to England's player of the tournament?
You hope that they weren't just playing like that because it was Italy.
I don't know if we'll get 13 Irish players in a test side.
They both had the look of people who had just witnessed a murder.
Brave Scotland, all they need to do is beat France by 52 points. And for Italy and Wales to beat Ireland and England. So
lump on.
Go.compare sponsors the Telegraph Rugby podcast. Every rugby player knows they need the support of their team to get the best results, and it's the same with insurance. When you are looking for great deals on your insurance, you can find the perfect support in Go.compare, helping compare the right deals for you. Feel the deal with Go.compare.
Hello everybody, welcome back to the Telegraph Rugby podcast. What a weekend we've had. Massive games, including, starting with that massive game in Dublin. Charles was there, he's going to tell us all about it. I'm Ben Coles, I'm joined as ever by Charlie Morgan. Hi Charlie.
Colesy.
And by Charles Richardson. Hello Charles.
Bonjour.
Let's dive straight in. Give us some of your highlights of the weekend. Charlie, starting with you.
Well, I did one of my favourite interviews of the year in the build-up to this weekend. It was with a young man called Enoch Poku Gyamfi, who's he's playing lock for Italy under 20. He's at Bath, having moved over to Milton Keynes from in and around Venice, where he grew up over COVID. So a few years ago now, he's been picked up by Bath. He is 6'5" and 150 kilos. He's a big boy. He's really caught the eye during the under 26 Nations, and he was really good against England under 20. Italy under 20 were pretty impressive, defiant in defeat. They went down, but played really well. And afterwards, I was sent a lovely picture of Enoch and his father, which was just as wholesome as the interview with him.
And talk to us about the heights there.
So Enoch is 6'5". His father, Jerry John, is 5'7".
Jerry John, fantastic.
But it just made for an absolutely lovely picture. Two extremely happy men.
Love that. Charles, what about you?
Good. After that, it's going to be underwhelming now, isn't it? I think it has to be. Obviously, there's so much to talk about, so much to get stuck into from Dublin, but I think it has to be the most audacious 22 exit that I think the sport might ever have seen. Tomo Ramos, a blind offload off the floor that almost didn't go into the hands of Louis Bielle-Biarrey, who's tracking round, who then is almost losing his balance, decides to crossfield kick to Damien Penaud on their own try line, basically. Penaud has to run backwards to collect it. The Irish smell blood, and then Penaud puts a great touch finder into halfway, and everyone in the stadium was just like, what have we just seen there? What is that?
So the only thing I've ever seen that is remotely close to that, I was in Australia finding myself and watched a Super Rugby game
got a bit heavy.
Yeah. I watched a Super Rugby match between the Reds and the Cheetahs, I think it was, at Suncorp, and Quade Cooper did the same. It was off a knock-on advantage, so less jeopardy, but his was across his own dead ball line pretty much too. I just had to Google the name of the winger, but you'll remember it. Super Rugby hero
Rod Davis.
Rocket Rod Davis. But it was wild, but not as wild as that whole exchange, because it didn't have Ramos throwing a blind offload at the start of it.
And I bet Quade Cooper's looks way more controlled and measured, whereas Bielle-Biarrey's just every single time Damien Penaud or Bielle-Biarrey kick the ball, it looks like they scuff it. Every single time, and it works every time.
I love that 2011 Reds team. They were so good. Can you indulge me? Can I have three mini highlights? The first one was getting off the tube yesterday in Tooting, coming back from Scotland, and seeing a bloke in a Moana Pacifica coat, which really threw me.
Was it Tom Savage?
I thought I was hallucinating and was like, is that Moana Pacifica coat? Second one was at Murrayfield, and the lovely bunch of gents in front of me at half-time tucking in some Waitrose crab pate, just with some crackers just during the interval, which I was thoroughly impressed by their kind of spread of
Normally
choices.
Get that sort of thing at the Rec.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
it was quite wrecky. I was quite impressed with it.
There was similar at the Aviva, actually. Sorry to butt in, but we were walking over to the Aviva in the sunshine, and there were a load of French fans who had found a lovely little wall and had set up their own buffet. They'd clearly brought it over. They had magnums of Chablis, genuinely, and we were just there like, yeah, God, you do actually just do it better, don't you?
There's right ways to do it,
Yeah.
and that is one of them. And just very finally, it was the Ross Vincent try. Just because I watched it, what I'm pretty sure is your Wi-Fi does work, and I was able to stream it while I was on the flight coming back from Scotland, and I sort of had noise cancelling headphones in and let out a slightly louder swear word than I was intending to, and other passengers then started looking over my shoulder, and then I had to show them what had happened on my phone.
We were next to each other, and as soon as he caught that, it was curtains for England, wasn't it? He's good.
People still seem to be surprised about how quick he is.
Yeah,
and
he is quick. He shouldn't be.
No, he showed it now in the Six Nations on the biggest stage numerous times. Anyway, we'll get into that, I'm sure.
Yeah. So apologies for the many highlights there, but I wanted to share them all. Well, listen, I think we're going to chat about England mainly in our next section. So, Charles, if we could just briefly summarise what you saw in Dublin just for a couple of minutes, and then we'll come back to it later. How would you do it?
The thing is, I don't want to sound sort of too pretentious here, but it did almost sort of like transcend the sport a little bit in that before the game in the city there were thousands of ticketless French fans. Sun was shining. It felt like a spectacle. It felt like it was going to be memorable, no matter the result. During the pre-match, except for the ridiculously elongated build-up with Michael D. Higgins, bless him, during the game, it felt like it was going to be a spectacle and it was going to be memorable. And then afterwards, it felt like it had been a spectacle and it had been memorable. And I think everybody who was there, chatting to the other journalists, were like, it didn't really matter who had won that game in terms of the way it panned out. Obviously, the scores were quite tight up until the sort of 48th minute, I think, something like that. If Ireland had sort of pushed away, it would have felt like, once again, like in 2023, we were there sort of watching something pretty special in terms of the sport, in terms of the atmosphere, in terms of the camaraderie, in terms of the energy that France brought in terms of their fans and also obviously their players, and the way that they played and the way that they won. It felt like it felt as good a rugby day really as I've sort of experienced, to be honest. And I would be absolutely sitting here saying exactly the same thing had Ireland won as well. Quite
satisfying that the game of the tournament actually lived up to the hype of being game of the tournament, because we didn't necessarily get that in Marseille last year, did we, in the opener? In that it was a great game, but Ireland sort of blew the doors off it.
Yeah, and France were a bit sort of soft, weren't they? And Ireland blew the doors off it. And it actually, I was at that game as well, and that did not feel like a great occasion, because obviously France had all this anticipation off the back of the World Cup in this fabulous stadium in Marseille, and the atmosphere was unbelievable. And then it was literally like someone put a pin in the balloon. Whereas it wasn't quite like that in Dublin. Obviously, I'm sure Irish fans might say differently, and they'll be very upset that they lost, and I get that. But I think as a neutral, I was just very impressed by it all.
Was it really quiet for that Bielle-Biarrey cross kick? Because it felt like everybody had sort of.
Well, I think everyone took
a big intake of breath, going, "Does he think it's half time?"
Yeah, and one of the sort of most unique experiences I've ever had at a sporting fixture was when Dupont went off, when he was down injured in front of us, and then it was like, oh my, everyone sort of realised that it was Dupont who was down injured, and then the moment where he gets up and the female physio gets underneath his arm to carry him off, genuinely there were like gasps and groans around us from Irish fans as well, and there was this sort of collective gasp like, oh my God, like he's coming off, and that's it. He's coming off, and it looks bad, And then that was like, at that point, you did think that Ireland would sort of maybe turn the screw and push on and win, especially with that Dan Sheehan try just after half time. But Maxime Lucu came on and sort of saved the day, didn't he?
Much more on that coming up in a little bit. But first, let's jump to, I was going to say Twickenham. It's not Twickenham anymore. It's the Allianz Stadium to hear about England's win over Italy. Right, you both saw this with your eyes. And
very eyes.
And I watched it
Well, actually,
in the sky.
I'm actually just going to have to quickly interrupt and say it struggled because of how bright the sunshine was.
So you're
Genuinely.
complaining about good weather?
We were in the East Stand, and it was actually quite tough to see what was going on because the sun was so strong and so low.
Have you not learned yet that you need to take a cap on days like that?
Well, but usually for the Six Nations, you'd be taking a cap to keep warm, like I would. I usually have a cap to keep warm, and if I'd have worn that, I was sweating anyway.
With
earpieces. Yeah, I was sweating. Like it was sunglasses, and it was So I left, I left my phone in the press room, which was really silly. So I had to dart back down and get it just before kickoff. I got back, and the leather seats that we have in the press thing, it was like boiling hot to the point where I sat down, and it was like it hurt. And I was like, "What is going on here? It's March. It's Six Nations."
There was a little, well, not quite a yelp, but there's certainly you were saying.
I went, like that,
I mean, honestly, not all heroes wear capes.
No, true. It's very well as me. First world problems and all that. I know.
Charlie, we talked about it being a big week for Richard Wigglesworth and England's attacking game, and they scored lots of great tries. I wonder, did they kind of deliver enough to make you happy?
Nearly. I think a big kind of compromising factor was the Ollie Lawrence injury. I think if you looked at that 23, that would be the sole injury that would be a problem and weaken them, just because he's a midfielder who adds thrust, Lawrence, and him going off was always likely to imbalance, sort of throw the backline sort of balance out of kilter a little bit, and that did happen. That was really interesting. I felt like as soon as somebody goes down off the ball, it always looks serious, doesn't it? And there was a horrible sort of, England carried on playing for a few phases, but so there was an awareness that they were going to have to rejig things, and it was sort of up in the air for a little bit what they would do, whether they would even, I thought about whether Freeman would go to 13 or whether they would bring Earl into the back line, even just because of that need for sort of a focal point and a little bit of dynamism in midfield. As it was, they obviously moved Daly up to 13s, had Dingwall and Daly, which you wouldn't say necessarily you have a keynote carrier there. Fraser Dingwall has really improved there, and his post-contact work has been really, really good this season, which has kind of precipitated his return. But yeah, with that compromising factor, and notwithstanding a really quite disappointing last quarter, I think there was a lot of good stuff. What just a final point, what was quite interesting was that when they really got pay, it was still through kick pressure, still through that maul, still through those real fundamentals of a Borthwick game plan. But they did show a sort of willingness to sort of, threaten inside their own 22, run the ball out of their own 22, play to width more quickly, and I think that's positive.
They had balance, right, Charles?
They did.
It wasn't as predictable and easy to read about in terms of who was going to carry, and then a box kick was going to go up. There was still kicking, but it was layered into more of a plan, wasn't it?
Yeah, and obviously what happened with Lawrence is really strong mitigation, because it also, when a serious looking injury like that happens so early on, it killed the atmosphere stone dead, didn't it? If the whole, and it's nobody's fault, it's just human nature. It really felt quite flat at that point, and England, you can only react to that, really. You can only be affected by that, and maybe sort of when then Italy sort of grew back into the game through those, two very, very good tries. Obviously, Ross Vincent and Capuozzo scoring, and then it did feel like, oh my word, England have gone a bit flat here. They've lost their sort of, their target in midfield. Italy, clearly have sensed that and are growing in confidence a bit. And is today the sunshine at Twickenham going to be the upset? But no, I think it was really impressive how they came back into it. They carried Will Stewart, those feet, I mean, that is probably the best feet from a prop you'll ever see. I mean,
Ty Furlong did something similar.
Ty Furlong did. Yeah, who did he step? I can't remember who he stepped now.
Was Stewart front row like agony?
I think so. I think it was on Nicotera.
Yeah,
I think it was on Nicotera,
which makes it even better.
Yeah, exactly.
Pain on
and we had, obviously, Tom Willis went off early, which was, I think, a bit of a surprise. I think we were all surprised by that, but I think we saw enough from him what England have been lacking, and especially with Lawrence going off. I think that was actually part of the surprise, in that they'd lost Lawrence, and as you said, the sort of main strike ball carrier in the back line. They'd obviously rejigged to Daly to 13, Smith at 15, and then taken the number 8 off quite early. Obviously, Ben Curry has been phenomenal off the bench, and he was again yesterday.
Is he close to England's player of the tournament?
Yeah, I think he probably is. Yeah, he must.
And
surely, if Tom Curry sort of hobbled off injured, Steve Borthwick said he was fine, but if Tom is out, then surely it's just a Curry for Curry swap, you'd think, given how well he's gone. But I mean, that's what made it even more surprising, the Tom Willis replacement, is because although he might not do as much as, he might not be as rounded as Ben Curry, he might do less off the ball than Ben Curry. On it, he is really, really what England have been lacking, and what we've been saying they've been lacking, and a sort of finally sort of answer to the lack of number 8 after Billy Vunipola. You know.
I just want to say one thing really quickly on the crowd, because I found the reaction to how England were playing really interesting. Because all week, or part of the week, has sort of been, we've been weighing up the argument about winning ugly versus sort of showing ambition in attack. In the build up to this game, a couple of England supporting mates were sort of saying, I'd actually prefer them to really give it a lash, and if they come up short, then they come up short. But at least they're trying to explore,
which is the opposite of what Alice Genge said in York, isn't it?
Yeah, and the opposite of what I thought they want. But actually, being in part of that crowd was really interesting, because there was a point when Italy came back into it at 21-17, and I looked across at Charles and said, did the crowd not mind the scoreline here? Are they genuinely not going to mind if Italy sort of even pull ahead, as long as England are doing things that are really unlike a Steve Borthwick side? So they dummied a box kick in the first half, went all the way across their own 22, and I think it was Brex, it might not have been, but Daly got caught in possession. You thought, geez, if they lose possession here, that's a real worry, and it's going to be the kind of thing that Steve Borthwick sides just do not do. Then they did it again. And Ross Vincent, with the craftiest piece of breakdown work, I think, even in the tournament as a whole, tackled Tom Willis, slid off a tackle on Tom Willis, but then also tackled Ellis Genge and made it look like Ellis Genge was going off his feet to seal off, and won a penalty. Those being sacked like that behind the game line in their own 22, Steve Borthwick sides don't do that. And there was almost a big sort of show to the crowd of, look, that's, we are expanding our horizons.
They did it on purpose.
I don't know. It was really, I just found it really, really strange.
I mean, I suppose the difficulty is they've done that, and it didn't necessarily work probably as well as they might have hoped. Admittedly, that is a stonewall penalty from Vincent on Genge that the TMO should be coming in for, frankly.
Amazing.
That was bad.
Because it's incredible. It's almost a yellow card, even though the area of the field, it really is.
You'd be raging if you got
You'd be raging if you got it. But it is, yellow cards are for cynical accident. It is the most cynical thing that we saw across the 3 games this weekend.
If you watch him, he wheels away.
It's amazingly, something housery that we'd say. It was awesome, and it was even more awesome that he got away with it. And Genge was furious, and actually remained furious for the rest of the game. Basically, just couldn't get to grips with it at all. But I mean, that didn't really work. However, what did work was, I think we've highlighted maybe even last week or the week before, how little England had been offloaded way more yesterday, and pretty successfully. You must. I think a lot of the forwards, English forwards, probably don't have the handling ability of the French forwards. In that, I don't think in a 2-on-1, if they needed to throw like a sort of 20 or 15 metre pass off their left hand, I think they would struggle, whereby some of the French forwards might succeed. But they do offload very well, and in that Ireland victory last year, probably the zenith under Borthwick so far, there was a lot of really good tight offloading. There was Underhill and Itoje. I remember, I think for that Furbank try, they can offload well. And Curry offload beautifully for Marcus Smith's try. Freeman's offloaded really well, and obviously there was that lovely little Mitchell-Jamie George bit when Slightholme scored in the corner. But now you hope that they weren't just playing like that because it was Italy. We need to see them be brave enough to do that against better sides, basically, and not go into their shells.
So on that, I mean that's the England try I've enjoyed the most for a long time, actually, that second Slightholme try. So with that, Charlie, will they play like that against Wales, or will they try and hit the roof?
Well, I think there's some relatively high percentage ways that they can be more ambitious in attack, and that was crystallised in their first try, which has come from Tom Willis mugging Stephen Varney ball going loose. I think it's Jamie George feeds Elliot Daly, looks up. I think there's a viable option of just clearing it, but he puts his head down, finds a bit of space on the short side and gets to halfway. They go through the hands. They're well in behind, and it ends up with Tom Willis picking a really clever line in front of Ellis Genge, sort of hiding, and then appears and pierces the line stretched out to score. A fascinating passage I saw was part of that last quarter, which was really flat, that I was talking about earlier. It's another turnover that they forced. Alex Mitchell is really clever. He basically played one of those classic wraparounds that they do all the time, and he actually runs behind to wait for that wraparound. Really clever bit of scrum half set piece defence. England forced a turnover again. I think it's Finn Smith throws a really long pass across to Slightly has a reserve tight head prop in front of him, Ferrari, I think, and just you can see the indecision. And if he's playing for Saints, puts his head down, absolutely isolates the tight head prop and causes a lot of damage. But you could just see the indecision of maybe him thinking, this is a test match. Is this all right? And it's just that mindset. And I think England have it in fits and starts. They've had it in all games, not just this game, in fits and starts. It's just being consistent with that and being aware that they have weapons that on which they can impose on opponents.
And I think there is a perception that certainly among the English rugby public, that Steve Borthwick and Richard Wigglesworth are sort of tightening a grip on the team and sort of, holding them back a bit and getting them to rein it in and limiting their freedom. And from everything we hear from those two coaches at press conferences, it is the opposite. I think there is a perception among the English public that if the players were left to their own devices, it would be jouet, let's chuck it around and we'll just do whatever we like and we'll play like Northampton and we'll have all the freedom in the world, devil may care, no consequences. But I think there is a perception that people think that it's Borthwick and Wigglesworth who are sort of making it more conservative and more pragmatic. They are telling us the opposite, in that they are saying we want the players to run more, we want them to play more, and in all of our analysis we've been identifying areas whereby against Scotland and probably against France as well, but certainly against Scotland, there were areas where we could have gone, where we could have been more positive, where we could have played faster and we could have moved the ball, and we didn't. And I do think that they are genuinely trying to make England move the ball better, play quicker, play more expansively. And I don't think they will ever talk about entertainment, but probably the unintended or intended consequence of that, the knock-on effect of that, is that it will be more entertaining.
I saw someone call him Snorthwick, which I thought was a bit harsh.
Well, after yesterday, I think it was harsh, yeah.
Just very, very finely and quickly, can I get a health update on, not you, on the lads, on England's players? So how's it shaping up for Wales? Doesn't look great. Lawrence out. Achilles?
Yes, it looked like that, and that would spell a long time on the sidelines. I think Tom Curry was hobbling in a way that he has been hobbling for a lot of this championship, certainly during France, and he succumbed to it against Scotland, didn't he? So that might be a 50-50 with the 6-day turnaround. Earl, I think, Earl came back on, so I think it was cut on his
to everyone's
knee.
Surprise.
Yeah. And I think he came back. I think the reason for him coming back on for Ted Hill was because they needed to keep that one more replacement in reserve, because Lawrence had gone off early and that would have really potentially exposed their 6-2 bench had they just had to play with 14, because they'd had another injury and Earl didn't come back on. So that was the reason for that. But I think, do you know what I watched? I'm fascinated to see what they do at 13 for Cardiff. I really like Oscar Beard, and I really liked the Dingwall-Beard combination for England A, because that gives you a bit of thrust with Beard and that sort of playmaker with Dingwall, with that sort of secondary, being able to be a secondary direct carrier in midfield. And they did lose a bit of balance there, and they had to be more lateral with the Dingwall-Daly midfield. So I would be, there's been a Slade-Daly midfield in Test match rugby before, but that
doesn't sound great.
That hasn't looked balanced, and it doesn't sound right. You're right, and I think that would be a explicit prioritising of experience over balance, which I'm not sure is the right way to go, even though it's Cardiff. So there's a big big decisions come there. Henry Pollock was, I think, for the first time warming up with the team. He's been in the wider training camp, but he was warming up with the team on Sunday. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see whether, if there are back row injuries and they do stick with the 6-2, he would be pretty well placed to come in for a debut as well.
We'll be picking our teams in the next coming days, so look out for those on the website. But now, over to Dublin. We're going to hear all about the massive win for France over Ireland.
Go.compare sponsors the Telegraph Rugby podcast. Go.compare is a proud sponsor of the WRU, offering support across all levels of rugby. We are big believers in the importance of grassroots rugby, and that's why we partnered with Telegraph Media Group to launch the Making a Difference campaign. From volunteers to groundsmen, referees to coaches, we wanted to celebrate the people who are really making a difference and reward them with £5,000 for their club to improve the grassroots game. Go to telegraph.co.uk/making a difference to find out more about the grassroots heroes who won our prize pot this year. Go.compare. Feel the deal.
Just like rugby, running a business takes grit, hard work, and a great team behind you. That's where Funding Circle comes in. As sponsors of Premiership Rugby, they're backing businesses like yours with access to fast, hassle-free finance to help you thrive. From coffee shops to kit manufacturers, they backed over 100,000 businesses with more than £13 billion since 2010. To find out how Funding Circle can help get your business goals over the line, visit fundingcircle.com/rugby.
Right, Charles. Ireland's hopes of a Grand Slam denied. Spectacularly denied as well. You touched on the atmosphere and how it lived up to the hype. But how were France just able to blow Ireland away in that second half?
Well, obviously, they rolled the dice with the 7-1 bench split, and in the end, it was the acid test, wasn't it? It was the litmus test, because they had their captain and the world's best player go off injured in the first half, and at that point, you're thinking, crikey, this 7-1 is really under pressure now. Admittedly, at least it was a positional like-for-like swap, and then Pierre-Louis Barassi has to go off with an HIA, and then you're thinking, wow. So then Oscar Jégu, the young La Rochelle flanker, comes on and has to play centre and looked like fine. Like, I mean, there was maybe a couple of errors, but I think he can be forgiven. And in terms of tests of the 7-1, well, they've just gone to the Grand Slam hunting Ireland, who were favourites to win on Saturday. They lost their captain and best player, who is a back, in the first half, and they've won fairly comfortably. So why would you not do it again if you were Fabien Galtier? How did they do it? The Toulouse front five, 4 of the Toulouse front 5 came off the bench in the second half, along with Anthony Gelanche, who is also part Toulouse. They kept that Toulouse cohesion. Obviously, it would have been better had Antoine Dupont also been on the field at the same time. Emmanuel Meafou coming off the bench was as good an impacts replacement as I've ever seen. I think he on 2 occasions he just waltzed straight through Caelan Doris as if he wasn't there, like just boshed him.
On Henshaw,
and the tackle on Henshaw. So I watched it back yesterday, and it is nowhere near as good on TV as it was live. So I'm glad that you've raised it, because live it was like, what have I just seen? Because when you saw. Who got the ball?
Henshaw, is that a bad decision from Henshaw?
Yeah, I think he's got to go for try and outpace him. But when you saw who it was with the ball and who he was against and how much space in the ground, you were like, well, this is a foregone conclusion, as in Ireland are scoring. And then it was like, oh my word, how have they not managed to do that? Meafou, and he's just got the softest hands as well, Meafou. Like, he is a brute, but he has these gorgeous hands, and he came on and he was a massive effective. He is one of the link men in for that fabulous Louis Bielle-Biarrey try. He links up. Gelanche is on the counter ruck as well with Ramos, and it was just, they unloaded this bench.
Gelanche was quietly brilliant.
He was, yeah. I mean, the whole of the French back row, all of them. I know Gelanche came on for Aldrit. Again, that was another weird number 8 substitution, because they lost their captain in the first half. Aldrit became captain, and then they hooked him quite early in the second half as well.
Captain at the end?
I actually don't know.
Yeah.
We never found out.
Bielle-Biarrey for a laugh.
Yeah. You know what? It actually might have been Luku, because
Really?
he obviously captains Bordeaux, and so it honestly might have been him, but we never found out. And obviously we'll come into the press conference afterwards, but Galtier was not asked in the press conference afterwards, and I don't think he was in any mood to be discussing the third choice.
What
captain.
a great segue to chat about it, because we need to chat about it in the clear out, and obviously you've written about it. What's your feeling on it 48 hours removed from the game?
I think Galtier is completely wrong on the Dupont incident. I do think it was accidental from Byrne. I really do. And there's been no sightings. I do think what Byrne did was accidental, and these things can happen. I don't think he's targeted the lower limb at all. I think it's a legal clean out, and then he's fallen over, and he's caught Dupont's leg in a really awkward position, and it is really unfortunate. However, I do think that the Nash yellow should have been a 20-minute red. So I think Galtier has a point on that one, but he seemed less angry about the Nash call, because at least there was some sanction against Nash. He went off for 10 minutes. But I do think that is a 20-minute red. I don't think I think there's barely any mitigation. You've got Barassi, who is completely upright. Nash is completely upright. That's the tackle they're trying to get out of the game. He's not really bent. It's head on head. It's not passive. Nash falls backwards because he gets clocked in the head.
I really don't get the passive.
No,
he's
passive. It's soaking. And I think what is now a red card, if for those sort of tackles, if that isn't, does it have to be sort of an egregious slamming of somebody in the head with either a shoulder or head where the attacker goes backwards? Is that the only thing that's now a 20-minute red? I don't know, but it was an incredibly surreal press conference afterwards, the most surreal I've ever been in, and certainly...
Was he even asked about the refereeing, or did he sort of come armed with it?
Come loaded.
Ready? Yeah.
He came armed with it, but he was asked
Did he wait till he sat down?
Yeah. He waited until he sat down, and they both had the look of people who had just witnessed a murder, basically. Both Galtier and Aldridge.
What is that?
And, just so serious, not a smile at all. It did not have the feel of a press conference of the winning side in any way. It had the feel of the press conference when France got chucked out of their own World Cup in the quarterfinals by South Africa. It had that vibe to it. And then he sat down, he was asked quite a generic question, and I think someone was like, "How's Antoine?" And then he absolutely went off on one, and obviously it was all in French, and the poor old Irish journalists hadn't understood like anything. There was no translation, which was a bit odd, but they hadn't understood anything, and they were all sort of leaving the press conference afterwards being like, "Oh, did he say anything good?" And I'm there like, "Yeah, he absolutely has." So he said that Byrne's actions were reprehensible. He said that they've highlighted 3 players to the citing commissioner. He said they're angry, they demand explanations. But there's been no sightings. The news yesterday was that there were no sightings from that game. So we'll see how it plays out. But they were certainly furious. And Antoine Dupont has confirmed that he's done knee cruciate ligaments, and so he's probably out for the season, definitely.
Is it worth absolutely underlining the amount? I think it's maybe worth absolutely underlining the amount of moving parts in the Byrne clear out, because it's Sheehan that makes the sort of half break, isn't it? And he isolates himself from support enough that there's a jackal opportunity. It's Michael Guillard. I've probably butchered that pronunciation, but it's him and Dupont who are involved in the tackle and then bounce up towards a jackal situation. Byrne initially, I think, aims for Guillard, and he has got his left arm, and you can tell that because he's got his left arm in a wrapping motion, which is perfectly legal. And that's why, though, that he then hits Dupont because Guillard withdraws, Byrne then hits Dupont from a slightly lateral angle, but it's legal, it's shoulder on shoulder, the right shoulder of Byrne. That's what forces Dupont into a vulnerable situation with his leg trapped. And then what's happened, very unfortunately at that point, is that Porter buffets Byrne from behind, and then all of that weight goes onto Dupont. So it's just a really rubbish accident.
In terms of the rugby, you look at almost to a man, France got the better of the opposite number, particularly on the back row, where I think Doris tried
Started
with all
well,
of his
didn't he?
might.
Had
Started very well.
3 turnovers or something in the first 20?
No, started very, very well. And while Ireland were in the game was when he was at his best, but then really just got completely overpowered, completely overwhelmed. The French back row was to a man better. I mean, Josh van der Fleer at times, he was quite anonymous, frankly. Missed a really, really soft tackle on Guillard for that exit from the 22 where he just went through him as if he wasn't there. And you're sort of thinking, oof, you know, is this a little bit chastening for, you know, Ireland, Lions, that sort of thing? I think Sheehan certainly came out with credit, but I think that scoreline flattered Ireland really. At 77 minutes, it was 42-13 the score, so I think that scoreline has flattered Ireland, and I think really along with Sheehan, 2 of the players to have emerged from that game with as much credit as anyone on the Irish team are James Lowe and Matt Ganson.
That 42-13 scoreline chastens me because Joe Church, who's a friend of mine, who's a big fan of the pod. We were texting beforehand and we sort of agreed. This was before the James Lowe sort of withdrawal, but we agreed that Ireland had nick it. And I got a message from him at 4 p.m. just saying, yep. So
well,
I was well off. Yeah.
I'm feeling very smug because in our pre-tournament, pre-championship predictions, I went France, no Grand Slam. However, I will confess, I did expect them to lose in Dublin and to win at Twickenham. And that was the way around I was going. Hey. I did not expect England to beat them at Twickenham and then for them to go to Dublin and win. But it doesn't matter.
You weren't alone. With Ireland, just to finish up, started well in terms of, but didn't convert it, did they? And then just had odd gaffes, like Gibson Park dropping a line out ball off the top, and the Porter penalty. Oh, what did you make of the Porter penalty for obstruction in the first half as well? Because I saw that had some people tearing their hair out when they started chasing it.
But but Gardner's.
Oh no! That was right in front of the press box.
Yeah,
and even before Gardner blew, because I think the call came from the AR. We said that's the new
Penno milked it quite well.
Penno appealed to the AR, but it was absolutely spot on. In fairness, like he could not get anywhere near the catcher, and there were people in front of him. There were quite a few soft penalties. In fairness, and I think, you know, I don't think Angus Gardner was responsible for the result of the game. I don't think that France won because of him or Ireland lost because of him, but I certainly think that there were a few quite soft penalties. But just, you know, back on the rugby, Ireland, you know, Sam Prendergast, I do think they need to persevere with, and I think he's going to be a phenomenal player. But I think he went into the lion's den a little bit on Saturday and he got caught as a bit of a rabbit in the headlights. And I don't just mean just because of a glaring interception at the end of the game. There were a couple of other moments where he's been physically just completely dominated. There was that shot from Murfana really early on in the first half that sent him careering backwards. But then there was also the Jegu in the second half where it looked like Prendergast got on the outside, and he's got a bit of pace. Prendergast, he chases Penno back pretty well, and you think he's on the outside of Jegu, and Jegu just comes across and completely swipes him, and he knocks on.
That was ridiculous from Jegu, because Jegu initially
was part of the
narrow by the wraparound.
Yeah. No, absolutely, and he did so well. But those are the sort of things whereby in tight games, everybody knows that Prendergast doesn't weigh or isn't as strong as much as the French back row, but they're the sort of things where you're going to get under pressure as a fly half, and you're going to wear shots, and you just have to deal with it better.
The Lions 10.
Well, I was just going to say, you saying Lions 10 obviously made me think Lions.
Lions 10.
Does it feel too early for him to go on the Lions tour? Because that's where
Ireland have a nice summer.
They do, but I think on the evidence of Saturday, I think last week I would have said probably no, and I think after Saturday, yes. I don't think Australia will be, they're not going to be as strong as France, but they do have some monstrous forwards like the French do. You know, you're looking at Skelton, Tupou, Angus Bell, and can you have somebody who has it in them to look a bit of a physical liability when you've only got 3 shots at it? I think I really rate Sam Prendergast, and I think they have to stick with him, and I think he's going to be the most phenomenal player. Is it a bit early for him to be the Lions test fly half? I certainly think there's an argument there. I do think there's an argument there. Who is the Lions test fly half? I have no idea at this moment in time. Who would I pick? I don't know. but I don't think it's necessarily as sewn up as it was 10 days ago.
Well, I can reassure you that Finn Russell played a lot better if we segue into Scotland-Wales and chat about that other game. Although a bizarre game where Scotland completely kind of switched off and went off the boil, much to the annoyance of the supporters around me at Murrayfield. Very impressive in the first half with the way they moved the ball. Wales just killer kind of individual errors in defence, because actually in the early minutes they were rushing out of the line quite well and blocking off those wider passing channels, and you wondered how Scotland were going to kind of find a way. But if you're missing one-on-one tackles or not covering the speed of Darcy Graham or the power of Diarmaid van der Merwe, then that's where the chances get created, and that's how Scotland was suddenly 2 tries up. And yeah, Wales kind of lost the plot a little bit. Like the second Tom Jordan try, where it's just a desperately flung pass back in by Blair Murray, is just it's fairly horror stuff. But credit to Wales for, I thought they looked a lot sharper when Jared Evans was on, and we had the bizarre kind of try that wasn't for Talipa Faletau because Blair Murray went hurdling over Will Hurd, didn't he? Which obviously you can't do, jumping into the tackler, which is a bit of a shame because it was spectacular to watch. But yeah,
but it's always a penalty.
Oh no, it's always
so
like you have to give it as a penalty.
So let's stop hand-wringing.
Stonewall.
It was just a shame. But it wasn't. A shame. It wasn't very well communicated, I found, because a lot of people were in the crowd were sort of. Even
Scottish fans?
Get the
loudspeaker?
No, it didn't. Right. So Scottish fans were like, why is this great try for Wales been denied?
Can we go back to Dublin a second on the loudspeaker when Angus Gardner explained the Flamand clear out on Omani and then he got booed and he said, wait, I'm going to explain to the crowd.
Yeah. Please stop booing.
Don't boo
but in Murrayfield, would you agree with a sort of assessment that my friend Reese made, that Wales probably should have lost that game by 40 points, but simultaneously should have won that game with how it panned out? Because I think they came back and really, if that Talupi Faletau try is given, which obviously it shouldn't have been, but say they scored in a different manner, really the comeback is well and truly on, and they could have, at one try and conversion, then nicking it by a point. And actually, when they scored in the 80th minute, the camera pans to Finn Russell's face and he looks furious, utterly gutted and furious, despite the fact they've just won with a bonus point at home.
But this is it, right? Like you want Scotland to. I think people are bored of talking about Scotland as the nearly team. Like, should have won at Twickenham, should have won this by more. I mean, so the score at half time is 28-8. Their most points against Wales ever is 35 from 2 years ago, and their biggest win is 27. So if you told me at half time that they weren't going to get past 35, I was just like, there's no way. Like they're obviously going to break both of these records.
What was the Wales body language early in the second half, and the Wales body language at 35-8, because sometimes those comebacks just are so surprising. So
this is where I quite like. I've really liked everything that Matt Sherratt has sort of done so far. But in the press conference afterwards, there was an honest question of, how proud are you for pulling it together? And he's like, look, hands up. Let's be honest. The game is done. Like, we're literally just playing to just play and just see what we can come up with. It's not like it's a tight game and we're producing this stuff. Like, I kind of appreciated that honesty from him.
His demeanour's awesome. Super.
It's going to be. And you often get this, don't you, with interim coaches where they impress you and then they don't get the full-time gig.
Cool supply teacher.
I don't know. I've really enjoyed what he's done the last couple of weeks, and they probably want to go for a bigger name and someone with more experience. But there's been a lot to like, and Jack Morgan played out of his mind as he does pretty much every test. You talked about the damage done to Ireland's kind of Lions. Good day for Scotland's Lions, I thought, as well.
Yeah. And Jack Morgan, he was outstanding, wasn't he?
Jack Morgan's pushing hard. Yeah. Great to see Darry Lake back. I do think, on a point on Tom Jordan, who keeps impressing me every week with the inside ball to set up the last try at Twickenham at Allianz Stadium, but also the way he played against Wales as well. Given his versatility, he's had starts this season, club and country, at 10, 12, 15. Maybe your Lions 10 situation is you just take Finn Russell and Finn Smith, and then you have Jordan just as a covering third 10 for midweek games. Maybe you don't need to sort of force another selection there if you don't need to. I think Tom Jordan's playing well enough that I would certainly I wouldn't be against that selection.
No. I think there's a good chance he goes because he covers 3 positions. He covers 3 positions, and you need that versatility. And he's playing really well in a side that still mathematically, if not realistically, could win the championship.
Well, this is it. I mean, we should do. I think we're going to do permutations in a little second. But Scotland, technically, again, they have a chance. But again, it's another year where it's like if, buts, and maybe. It's like the end of the Scotland-France game at Murrayfield last year. That was the big one that kind of everybody wondered about. Now we've got them not winning at Twickenham. Oh, finally, before we wrap this up, Finn Russell's goal kicking much better. And amusingly, his first conversion was for the Black England try was basically in the same spot as the one he missed at Twickenham, and you could see him running off afterwards, kind of laughing because he was like, "Of course, I've nailed that one."
Yeah.
Whereas I missed it at Allianz Stadium a couple of weeks before.
Well, on a similar theme, Finn Smith's goal kicking also outstanding, and continued. He continued with the tee even after Marcus Smith came on.
Why are you panicking about 2 Lions 10s then? There you go.
Yeah,
there's 2 in the bag.
And also on a very sort of just off what you've said about strange halftime takes. I don't think like you said about you wouldn't have predicted how it finished Scotland Wales at halftime. No way would I have done that at halftime of Ireland France either, where it was 6-8 and it's finished 27-42.
Yeah, madness. But that's why it was a great day. A couple of great games. Right, listeners, I know you've got your abacus out at home and you're trying to work out who is going to win the Six Nations and how, but do not worry, we're going to explain it. Well, we'll do our best to explain it anyway. So, for France, if I just get the document up
for France, a bonus point win seals it, no matter what happens. If France beat Scotland with a bonus point,
because they'd be on 21 points, wouldn't they?
Then nothing else matters. Yes. They will seal the tournament. And realistically, a win of any kind will also do it because their points difference is
Italy rolled over.
It's essentially an extra point, isn't it? Their points difference. Because it's
really
outrageous.
Ireland and England need France to either lose to Scotland or to draw. Probably without a bonus point, but Scotland need to do Ireland and England a favour in Paris, essentially.
Which means England are going to need to beat Wales with a bonus point.
They will probably need to beat Wales.
Scottish miracle.
I don't think they need to worry about points difference because, as I said, like the championship could come down to points difference, but they're not going to revert the balance. They're not going to reverse what's gone on in Cardiff. They just need to worry about winning the game and getting a bonus point if possible, and then that would put them in the best. That would put the pressure on France then at least. Because England obviously play first. So a bonus point win in Cardiff puts the pressure on France.
And say you had the bizarre situation where England got a bonus point win and France drew with Scotland and they got a bonus point and they were all tied on 19, France would do it because of the bonus points, because of the points difference as well.
Yeah.
So that's another factor. Ireland, on the other hand, are going to need a lot of favours. They're going to need
Wales,
England to lose in Cardiff. They're going to need Scotland to beat France, and they're going to need to get a bonus point win against Italy, which they might do. But
I think the most likely scenario here is that Ireland finish third, which is quite mad when you think about where they were at 2 p.m. on Saturday.
If I told you 4 rounds in that Ireland's points difference was worse than England's, would you believe me?
Absolutely not.
I don't know if I would have believed that.
But Italy lost.
Yeah,
maybe.
So they could revert that, but even so, I think they still most likely finish third because I think England. There's a lot riding on it for England, and I think they will go there and they will try and blow Wales away to then put the pressure on France. It might all be futile, but they will have to go and put the pressure on France, won't they? I mean, I think, and also what we should say is on the permutations, a bonus point win for England in Cardiff.
I was just trying to figure out.
Guarantees them second.
Yeah.
At least. So if they win with a bonus point in Cardiff, it doesn't matter what Ireland have done in Rome, and it doesn't matter what France do. They will guarantee at least second, which is the best finish. Would be the best finish under Steve Borthwick so far.
And means they hit their wins target.
And means they hit their wins
scoffed at.
Yeah, but I don't think they've got the equivalent of a bonus point win in Cardiff since 2003.
We can get on to that and have a little discussion about that. And finally, brave Scotland, all they need to do is beat France by 52 points, and for Italy and Wales to beat Ireland and England. So
lump on.
Listen, I mean, it's not been ruled out, but it feels unlikely. Now, your questions. bit more time to do questions this week, so we will get through them as well as we can. Just before we get into Lions-related stuff, a quick announcement, which is that the Lions squad will be confirmed on May the 8th, and it will be done in front of a live audience of about 2,000 fans at the O2, which is quite an impressive, because we've done Lions squad announcements before where they've just been in nice like hotel rooms, haven't they?
Well,
and there's been lots of red lighting. So
2021 was holograms and things, wasn't it?
Yes.
I totally made that up. Was that a COVID
fever
dream?
I remember being on a Zoom for it, but I can't remember. It might have been holograms.
For the telly. For Sky Sports stuff.
What doth it profit a sporting organisation if it gained the world but sold its soul?
Wow. Okay.
That's all I can add on that, I'm afraid.
Wow. Are you not happy about this?
I tell you what was amazing. Have you seen the Springboks
It's
World
like
Cup?
easy marketing.
Have you seen the Springboks squad announcement for 2023, the World Cup? Brilliant. Amazing.
Oh, yeah.
Every player just met with huge cheers, massive emotion. It's something different. I quite like it.
I want to hear more why Charles doesn't
Charles
like it.
We don't have time.
Oh, dear. That's a shame. We'll save that for when the podcast returns. So Andrew wanted to know, on a Lions-related note, before the Six Nations, it was expected the squad would be dominated by Ireland, but basically, does that kind of change now if they're not the top finishing home nation? I would say no, because I still think they will be the dominant side in there. Now, if you're talking a squad of 36, 37, I think there was a time where we thought they'd have like 18 players. Maybe it's a bit lower than that. Maybe it's like 15 or 16. But no, I still think they'll make up the bulk of it.
I agree. I think the only sort of nuance I can offer there is that I think that the squad will be picked on form, and I think that by the time the squad is picked, the Irish guys will be in form. I'm sure Leinster will be doing really well in Europe, and those European knockouts are always really big rounds for Lions tour selection as well. Players who can just sort of come out of nowhere and it's like, wow, look how well X is playing. And then everyone starts talking about him. And we have seen players called up on the back of sensational performances in European knockouts. I don't think losing to a fabulous French team, although they were comfortably second best, I don't think it is going to be terminal to Irish Lions hopes. I think there could be, as I said, there should be question marks and questions asked, and I think that's fair, but they will still form the majority.
I mean, they've still got a pretty convincing triple crown.
Triple crown.
And there's another sort of facet to this is 2013 is sort of the archetypal fortunes changing on one game, but that was between two nations who are contributing to the Lions, so it's a little bit different. I'm with you both in that I think we maybe less heavy than we anticipated, but I still think they'll be the dominant presence.
I don't know if we'll get 13 Irish players in a test side necessarily, like
maybe not. No.
Wales with the Lions in 2013. But I don't know if I felt that way anyway. So I'm still, I'd be very surprised if they weren't the dominant side. Another Lions question from Taylor. He wants to know, is Ben Curry played himself into the Lions reckoning alongside his brother? He is giving off like Bolter vibes, isn't he, Ben Curry?
He looks massive.
The way
the
form he's in and the way he's playing.
I think he's 100% a Lions bolter. In fact, maybe even not. Maybe even not a bolter.
If you're 100% a Lions bolter, you're a tourist.
You're a. I guess in the conversation, I think he's in contention to tour, and I don't think he would be considered a bolter necessarily. I think he's played every game in the Six Nations for England. They could finish second. He's looked like one of their best players. He's good enough to start. He's playing well enough to start at the minute. If Ben White's not a bolter, then I don't think Ben Curry is either.
He was a defining
Rory Darge.
He was a defining presence in that Scotland game where his brother was a little bit quieter. That's the one sort of quieter game that his brother has had, and sort of related to this is related to the point that you made, Charles, in that those Champions Cup games will be will come into Andy Farrell's sort of consideration, and Sale have what is a shot to nothing in Toulouse, and if they
Dupontless
Toulouse, and
what a few months it is for Paul Grow, Toulouse's second choice scrum half, who never gets on.
Yeah,
where's the boy Saito? Is he?
Saito will also be in the mix. Capuozzo, he might be covering.
He's been moonlighting.
But yeah, if Sale went down to Toulouse and won, and the Curry twins shone, then they sort of almost have to go, don't they? Against Jack Willis, who many are talking up as, a potential Lions tourist. I think, I think, he's more than a bolter.
I feel vindicated for including so many England and English players in that article at the start of the tournament about the open sides, because the open sides is going to be a mad dash, but there's a lot of English interest within that dash.
Speaking of bolters, what have you written about Elliot Daly this morning, Charlie?
That he could be, I'm loath to say definitely the first veteran who's a bolter, because I'm sure it's happened before, but a sort of, you could categorize him as a bolter going for a third tour, which is, you could actually probably, there's a later question that we're going to get to about Faletau's chances. He could sort of be a bolter on his fourth tour, so that's remarkable as well. But he's going to
veterans.
Who is that even a thing?
I think it's the
Matt Stevens in 2009, because he could play both sides. I'm trying to think how old he was.
Good shout. Dai Young went on the 2001 tour and the 1997 tour.
Ian Evans in
1989.
Evan.
Yeah, there will be cases of it happening
isn't it?
before, but the piece is about Daly and how we've always known he's offered versatility, but he's offered a real poise to England this championship. I think he offers more at 15. I think that was crystallised in that first England try, as we've spoken about how we thought the balance of the midfield was a little bit off, but 11 that's where he scored the try from against France. 13, 15, 23. He could be a big factor in that there. Andy Farrell will know him very well. There's a lot going for him, and he's making a decent run at it.
Charles, Joey wants to know, with Ireland, was it a bad day at the office against the sensational France team, or is it the beginning of the end? Have they sort of peaked? I know obviously we had the kind of farewells to Cian Healy and Conor Murray and Peter Marnie in Dublin, their kind of last home Irish game. Do you feel like this Irish side is sort of on the other side of the hill at the moment, or?
That's a tricky one. I suppose you can't really make such a sort of generalised judgment after one game. I would agree, Joey, that it was a bad day at the office against a sensational French team, and I think we're all sort of thinking what might have been with this French team at Twickenham, in that they look clearly better than all the other teams in the tournament. But equally, there is probably a scenario where they could lose to Scotland on Saturday night, which is just them. But I think we're all quite annoyed that they missed out on a Grand Slam championship here. I think, we could have seen a Grand Slam, and they basically from basically a lack of concentration and a lackadaisical touch at Twickenham, it could cost them a Grand Slam. This is a sensational French team, certainly a sensational French squad. Ireland were not at their best, and France played very, very well and put them to the sword. I suppose it's about how Ireland bounce back from that now. Obviously, they don't have their head coach there, which is going to affect any team, no matter how much they say it won't. Beginning of the golden era's end, I don't think so. I think they've got enough class there, and Leinster are going to be in the Champions Cup final surely. And I think the three players who are retiring are only one of them starts, and Murray arguably isn't in the 23 if Casey's fit. I think they'll be all right.
Yeah. Charlie Hugh wants to know, is Talupi Faletau Wales' greatest ever player?
Oh, geez.
Going to say no.
I don't think so, but he is a marvel.
We've had loads of questions about him and sort of teasing whether he could be a Lions veteran bolter.
For the try that wasn't, he looked as though he was playing in a dads and lads game, didn't he? And that was just really cool to watch. He is just fantastic player. So he did a social media post after a game against Dan Lydiate earlier this season. And I think the caption just said till the wheels fall off. It actually made me quite emotional. I just thought it was really, really nice. Those two guys still trucking. He's such a good player.
And finally, sorry, Charles, I thought you had something to. Thought you were keen to say something there.
No.
Nothing there.
No, nothing. No, nothing more to add.
Right, that's it for today. Thank you, Charlie. Thank you, Charles. Some quick predictions to round off then. You have to give me who wins each game and the title winner. So, Charlie, starting with you.
Ireland, England, France.
And to save a bit of time, I'm identical.
for variety, because I've had a funny feeling about that Wales-England game. I don't know how Wales are going to do it. And I'm,
I think, well,
and I
we
don't,
really quickly,
I don't know how Wales are actually going to pull it off. But
scrum pens dominating in
there's
the
just something
air
about it
and a
that
bit of
just gives me the-
attacking fluency. I think there's definitely. I don't mean to dismiss Wales's chances at all. I think they could. I think they could have capitulated in at Murrayfield, and that would have still in the last weekend still would have been tight and tense,
Yeah,
and really tricky for England. It's going to be
It just
tight.
has to come to
Bit
an
of
end at
class.
some point. And those Wales-England games in a vacuum are weird.
Bit of class, bit of magic.
So
3 cheers for Blair Murray.
maybe. Super Saturday, where are we going to be? I think I'm potentially in Rome as things stand. Charlie?
You're floating, aren't you? Floating roll. I'm Cardiff, going to hopefully catch the under-20s on the Friday. as
Nice. Okay.
I'm in Paris for probably a very stressful evening on Saturday night, with England being the clubhouse leader, as you said yesterday. England probably being the clubhouse leader in terms of the Six Nations title, and then very close, not taking you behind the curtain too much, but very close to deadline. I'm probably going to have to sort of write a report. Hopefully it becomes very clear who's won by about the 60th minute, but things never really seem that easy, and it's that simple in France.
Trophy presentation as the sun comes up, but given the late kickoff time.
Yeah.
Hope you
9:05 p.m. local time kickoff.
I hope your seat isn't too hot as well. Very
Well,
concerned.
it won't be at that time.
Very concerned.
Won't be at that time.
Very concerned.
Be yelping because it's cold.
Please keep up to date with all our Six Nations coverage this week. There's going to be loads, as you can imagine, building up to the final weekend. And please use our Lions selector tool as well. It's getting harder to pick these squads, isn't it, with the way teams are playing? So have a go at picking yours now. Enjoy all the games. We'll speak to you next week. But until then, goodbye.
Go.compare sponsors the Telegraph Rugby podcast. Every rugby player knows they need the support of their team to get the best results, and it's the same with insurance. When you are looking for great deals on your insurance, you can find the perfect support in Go.compare, helping compare the right deals for you. Feel the deal with Go.compare.